And we are live. What's going on? It's Chris and Emily from LifterLMS, and you know what day it is. It's Feature Friday, now on Tuesday. Today is part 4 of our 4-part series on full site editing. So we're talking about how to use modern WordPress in terms of design and templating and blocks and all kinds of things. Today we're going deep into the design aspect. We're going into styles. So this is everything from typography to layouts to colors and various design enhancements you can do to your website if you're using a full site editing based theme like the one we make at LifterLMS called Sky Pilot, which is the only full site editing WordPress theme with an exclusive e-learning focus. We're going to show you how to navigate the styles, and just a caveat, with great power comes great responsibility. So the defaults in Sky Pilot are really good, but if you ever decide, oh, hey, I really want to use a different font, or I want my buttons to be a different color, or I want the background of my website to not be white, I want it to be something else, you can do all of that in full site editing in the styles aspect of the editor. Emily's going to take us to school today on how to work with styles in full site editing. Over to you, Emily.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. So jumping into my demo site here, when we're building with full site editing, we're often going to be using blocks, and that's what these styles are going to pertain to primarily. So if we go to Appearance Editor, let's first locate the styles, and then we'll go back and forth so you can see the changes we're making and how they look on the front end of the website. So the area we're looking at today is styles. We have 6 options here: typography, colors, background, shadows, layout, and blocks. Just a high-level overview. Typography is going to be the fonts on your website, the sizes of those fonts, and how they appear in buttons, headings, and paragraphs. Colors are going to be things like your text color, the color of the background, the color of buttons, things like that. The backgrounds themselves could be an image background, or if you selected a color background, that's available. Shadows are something that's relatively unique, relatively new. I mean, you've always had the ability with Elementor, Beaver Builder, Divi to work with things like shadows, or if you know custom CSS, you've had the ability to work with shadows for a long time, but we now have the option to create multiple different types of shadows right in our style editor, and then apply those different types of shadows in our website. And then layout, that's going to be the width of our website and the padding we have on the top and bottom of our pages by default, and then each block can be customizable. So diving in, this is something, like Chris said, with great power comes great responsibility, where you're going to want to think about the changes you're making as you're making them, because if you're looking at like, oh, I'm just looking at my homepage over here on the right side, and then I change my default font family, it will change across my entire website. So if we change our font, let's say to, these are the fonts in my library, I can upload fonts or install fonts if I wanted to connect to Google for that. But let's just say, like, if we change this to Open Sans, and then these are what's in my library right now. If I change my text block, I think this is an H1 actually. Let's jump to headings, font family, Open Sans. We'll see that this change takes place not only on the page title, but also on the heading there, and then all my headings down here are going to be hit by this change. So you got to realize that you are making sweeping changes. But as you're first building a website, if you want to build it as efficiently as possible, figuring out what fonts you want to have, what sizes you want to have, you could do that kind of thing in a Canva software, a Figma software, and then bring those styles over here. So if you've decided that all of your fonts are going to be Montserrat, Open Sans, and System Sans Serif, that's good. But you can also install other fonts, select those as your default fonts, and then edit your headings, text blocks, etc. to use those different fonts that are available. We can see we have a paragraph text block. Oh no, take me back. We have a paragraph text block that says discover more courses. And if we change the font family, I think that's is that a heading block? That might be a heading block. Let's see. Looks like that might be a heading block. Let's see. So this is where we actually want to come into our page. and kind of see a live review of what we're doing. So let's say we're looking at this featured courses section. This is a paragraph block. And so we can edit the color of this block individually, but we can also edit the colors over in our global editor. So if we're in something like colors and we want to change this background from, maybe it's black and we are going with like a dark green or something like that. Let's edit our text. Let's set our color to a green. We'll see that this change takes place. And if you want to add a hex code, you just have to click on this little color swatch that you see pop up. I've had this question a lot when people are changing a text color. They're like, how do I add my own hex code? Because I don't see where to add that. You just click the little color swatch. And the same thing applies when you're editing your colors in bulk, is just click that. And then you can bring your color down to a dark green. But remember, this is a text on our whole website. So we'll want to make sure we're happy with it. When we're done, we just click review changes. It tells us what changes we're going to be making and then save. Oftentimes in tutorials, we click through that pop-up really fast. It says, hey, this is what you're changing. But in this setting, it will tell you everything you're changing on your website. So we took a look at typography for text, but we could also look at typography for buttons. So we see our view all courses button here is likely using these settings. If we changed our font size to 54, we could change buttons across our whole website. You can see that all of our buttons got large, but if that's what we're trying to do, is make those sweeping changes, we can absolutely do that. So we can change our buttons, we can change the appearance of the text. That's the point thickness. Oftentimes, you'll see values like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 for the point thickness of your fonts. But in this case, we're looking at bold, black, regular italics. You have a lot of options, but I think we started on bold. We can also change our line height. If you have buttons that wrap, you can change things like letter spacing. This is something people often get confused, is line height versus letter spacing. And we could do a whole course about all of these different components. But line height, as you see, is the distance between these lines in platform is getting further apart. And then letter spacing is the space between the letters. So that's in between each of these individual letters. How much space do we have? I don't usually recommend customizing that, but if you are getting particularly fancy and detailed, you can. And then letter casing, if we want things to be in all caps or not. These options that apply to our text elements also apply to our links, headings, captions, and to our buttons, except buttons include some background colors. But this is basically how we can set the presets and all of the settings for all of the text across our website and typography and colors. We took a look at this before where we changed the color of paragraph text to a dark green, and you can see that still applying here. We can change things like the background across our website. I wouldn't recommend something like this. If you want to do dark and light background, often when we're digging around in these settings, we're thinking, do we want to do dark mode, light mode? I would recommend a dedicated plugin for that rather than trying to turn your website into dark mode. I would design it light and then turn on dark mode plugin. That's kind of a side feature, but something I think about a lot when modifying here and people want dark backgrounds. We can also change our default color palette. When people are working in WordPress, they tell me like, these are not my brand colors. Like, what is this? And so that is something you can modify here. So if we wanted to change some of our theme colors, like this one is no longer a brand color, we're going pink. We can review our change, save our change, and that should take when we're editing our pages or anything on the website. So let our page reload, modify something that involves color, like this text block, settings, color. You can see our pink is now here in place of that other color. So we can design our color palettes. We can even build custom color palettes if we have so many colors that we want more to display down here at the bottom. You could do that if you wanted to edit the color palette, but that's how you can determine colors globally on your website, design custom palettes, and then if you build a template or a page that has its own color set, it will override these global defaults. Background, if you wanted to add an image to your site background instead of a color, you can find that there. Shadows are very cool. By default, we have natural, deep, sharp, outlined, and crisp. We can see that there are a few features. We have multiple drop shadows and different, like so for the natural shadow, for example, we can see what composes. Zooming in doesn't work. We can see the color that the shadow is. We can see that it's an outset or inset shadow. And then we can see the exact positioning and we can modify it if we have our own definition of a natural shadow. For most course creators, you're not going to need to modify shadows, but it's available here, and each shadow has a little bit of a different design to it. And this one's particularly interesting. It has like 2 drop shadow features, and you can even build your own custom drop shadows if you want to, with multiple different levels of effects. So if you wanted like a red and then a green, I don't know, if you're building like a really interesting site build with like multicolor shadows, you can change the depth and format of each of the shadows and then apply it to your various elements. Like, for example, if we wanted to apply a shadow to our group, we could go to border and shadow, and then we could turn on the shadow checkbox and then select which shadow that we've designed here that we want to apply. And yeah, so that's the shadows editor. Most people won't be using that one probably. But then layout, like we talked about before, just the general content width of your website. If you have like a website that's only going to be 900 pixels wide on every page, you might do something like make that 900 pixel change. And I bet I'm overwriting this in this template right now. I would assume it's not using site defaults, but this is a good example of when we use a template, it can override these site defaults. But basically, this will be the default content width that if a template does not assign a content width, it will fall back to that. I'm pretty sure in our layouts that we assign a content width for everything. And if you wanted to customize each block, you can do so. So for example, images have cool effects like rounded corners you can do filters. This was a popular thing that people thought was really going to apply to a lot of WordPress websites. And I haven't seen many course creators use this feature, but it allows you to duotone your photos with little filters. You can make the corners of your photos rounded if you want to. You can change the dimensions and margins for each image. You can find all these image settings on every single individual image in your website, but if you want to set general image settings, you can do that. And the same applies to everything: quotes, paragraphs, headings. If you want to set default presets for any block on your website, the way that you could in a page, but instead for all blocks, you can do that in styles. That was kind of a mouthful. Pass it over to you, Chris. What do you think of the styles in WordPress?
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to do like a little pro tip section here and just talk about, if we could wave a magic wand, how we think it would be best to approach this kind of design aspect of websites, particularly if you're not a designer. And there's a concept to do before you build the website. This is the magic wand, because sometimes people figure this out later after they've already built the website. But you can have what's known as a brand kit or a style guide created for your brand, ideally before your website has even started, or before you engage somebody to build your website for you. And a brand kit will like have things like typography, font choices, line spaces, brand colors, hex codes, all the shadow stuff and line spacing and all the stuff. But I'll pass it back to you, Emily. Like, what advice would you, if somebody's like just getting started building an LMS website, they want to have a unique brand, maybe they have a logo, maybe they don't. I mean, a logo is part of a brand kit, and even the spacing around a logo is part of a brand kit. But what would you, if you could wave a magic wand before any client ever came to you, what would be in the brand kit or the style guide to make life easier and have a even more beautiful finished product?
Yeah, I think I've done a lot of like style kits or the guides for the design guides. And a lot of times what they'll include is basically everything in this WordPress editor is that what's the point thickness of your fonts. You're going to find using softwares like Figma or Canva where you can be totally creative and totally like open board. It's like drawing on a whiteboard, but digitally online. You can design anything you want with shapes, patterns, colors, associative images. I know when I design sites for clients, I ask them to like send me photos of them, speaking to their customers, or like if they do in-person workshops, we'll have like in-person photos, we'll have conceptual photos, we'll have just whatever they want to have their business associated with. And there's like color theory and all kinds of things that go into it. We decide like, is this business trying to create a feel of lightness and airiness and making this process easy? Maybe if we're coming from an industrial style industry, we might have our website designed in such a way to invoke feelings of like ease, because industrial stuff is often so kind of like basic HTML websites that are hard to deal with. So we'll start with those associative imagery, we'll move into colors, and then those colors as you know, will transfer right into your styles panel in WordPress. If you and your designer talked about like a light, airy website feel, we might have things like clouds and sky, which are going to be like blue and white. And we have a lot of blue and white here by default because that's Lifter's color palette, making things easy and kind of refreshing. But if you decided like earthy and you're in these dark green color palettes, it makes it really easy to go from a software where you're completely open form into the styles panel if you've already figured all this stuff out. And better yet, you can get a WordPress designer, someone who knows how to use full site editing, to do it for you, because then they'll just put the styles directly in your WordPress site for you. I notice some people get a Canva Figma designer to sign off on a design. They pass it to a WordPress expert to bring what the Canva design is into WordPress, and then you as the site owner had to pay 2 people to get along in that process. But if you find the LifterLMS experts page or in our Facebook group, you'll find a lot of people who are skilled at design and can implement this directly for you. That's kind of my tips.
Yeah, that's awesome. And once you have your design, my advice is to stick to it. So like what we've been showing you with full site editing, we've been showing you a lot of global things. Like this is how to build a sales page. And if you do a sales page template, like make all your sales pages follow that same design, or because what happens, the block editor is really powerful and you can start customizing individual pieces. But if there's many other things like this page on your website, and they all have a different look and feel and font, it starts to feel like a disjointed brand. And that's the danger of it all. I have a curveball for you. I actually had 2, but you found one of them, which was the duotone images. But my other one, some people get excited about shadows. I think it's really cool. There's 2 places where I'd recommend shadows, like if you want to play around with it. I think the most important, you can put them on images. Like I personally like to put shadows on images within blog content. It makes the image pop out. It gives the reader a break from reading and they can just like pause, view the image. It kind of stands out. Particularly our blog post has a lot of screenshots and stuff. So it's a lot of white on white. So the shadow really helps it stand out. But I think one of the best places to put a shadow is on a button, because a button is a call to action. You want your users to click on it. Could you show us in the full site editor how to globally apply a shadow to the buttons at a global level?
Yeah, no, this is a really great example. So I have shadow 1, which I didn't actually give shadow 1 a name, but if I called it like button shadow, we could either, let's see if we can apply custom shadows to buttons. This is something I don't even know if you can do that. So if we go to blocks, and we're going to find our button block here. And sometimes people get confused in the full site editor because there's button and buttons. It's like, what's the difference? A buttons block contains buttons, but individual buttons are buttons. So that hopefully that makes it less confusing, but it's pretty confusing. So we have our button here. This is our default style that we see across our website. If we wanted to add an element like a border or shadow, you see here's our shadow option, and we can select, this is the custom one I just did, button shadow, and I could select it. It's got that 3-color gradient there. So I could select that as my button shadow. You'll see that'll apply to these across my website by default. And then we could also create a custom shadow if we wanted to as well for this, but that's how you can apply a shadow to a button, and you can even design your own shadow to apply to buttons across your website. So a lot of flexibility.
That's awesome. Yep, you found it. That's cool. Yeah, I recommend buttons are a cool thing to play with in terms of inserting your brand, your action color or shadow, make them stand out. And, you know, there's concepts in design, like flat design pretty much means no shadows. And just like everything is like flat on the page. But then there's other styles, or maybe you do a hybrid and like, yeah, I have a flat design, but I do want my buttons to stand off a little bit with a shadow. So there's lots of different ways to do it. But that's it for this Feature Friday on full site editing styles. So thank you for the great demo, Emily. You out there watching, smash the like button, drop a comment down below, tell your friends, and let us know what video you'd like for us to make for you next. If you're confused on anything with design or full site editing, just let us know, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.